Hello, everybody. Welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, joined by my friends and co-hosts, Mehrob and Nolan. We have a lot to get into today. The NBA Finals tip off in just about half an hour. We're going to go over everything you need to know about that. The big story we've been waiting on in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers officially agrees to sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll break that down as well as a bunch of other QB battles in Indianapolis as well as in Cleveland. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday, June 5th, all over the place here today. But like I was saying, we're going to get into the big story in sports here to start it off. We're going to talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers, the one that we have been waiting on in the NFL for months at this point. This has seemed like all but a done deal since the draft, maybe even a little bit before then, that Aaron Rodgers would be the next quarterback for the Steelers. There was a lot of feet being dragged through the mud here, but now that it's official, we know his deal, $20 million for 1 year. He is going to lead the Pittsburgh Steelers to be what this season? Are they going to be mediocre? Are they going to be better? What does this do for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
It really doesn't do much. In my opinion, I still think they'll be a 9-8 team. Maybe a 10-7 team, make the playoffs and get bounced first round. If not, maybe go on to round 2 for the first time in like 6 or 7 years. Yeah, they have a solid roster. The defense is so strong. They have DK Metcalf now. That's a big addition, even though you have to get rid of your other wide receiver one at the time. But, they're still going to be mediocre. He's a great quarterback. He's a phenomenal quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But as you saw with the time in New York, he's kind of fallen off a little bit. He's kind of declined. He's getting old. He's getting to an age where playing football is like really hurt. It's gonna hurt your body if you keep playing at this point. But he's still playing it because he loves it, and he's just not playing his best ball. Even he's getting old. He's just getting older. That's just how it is. And him being signed is gonna be good for the Steelers. Though they drafted Will Howard. It's gonna be great for him to get some reps behind Aaron Rodgers. One of the greatest of all time. Build up his reputation. Get him. It's gonna be great to have a vet like him teaching him the ropes, helping him become the best quarterback that he can be. So it really won't do much for them, but it's going to be good for the quarterback room, but for the team in general, probably a 9-8 or 10-7 team at best.
Yeah, no, definitely a massive signing for them, right? You bring up the depth chart that's there right now. You have your guy in Mason Rudolph, who's most likely going to be the backup, Will Howard behind him. That is a little bit of a crowded quarterback room. You bring in a guy in Aaron Rodgers who going to be 42 years old now, coming off of a season where his numbers might have looked okay. 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, but it was just not a good passing offense, specifically for the first half of the season with the Jets. Started to figure it out a little bit down the stretch. Mehrob, are you buying into Aaron Rodgers on this one, or is the Jets version of the Aaron Rodgers what we're going to get when he comes and plays in Pittsburgh?
This is a guy in Aaron Rodgers that I'm definitely not. I'm definitely a little bit worried about him when I first think about him. This is a guy that's definitely been on the decline for the last few years now, even going back to his days with Green Bay, those last 3 years with him. They would have good regular seasons, but even in the playoffs, what's the biggest reason you want to bring in Aaron Rodgers? What's the one thing that the Steelers need? You have a strong defense, you have a good running game, you have some wide receivers around you. The one reason why they were okay with moving on from Russell Wilson was because they needed a legit game manager, a better quarterback that's more accurate down the stretch in key situations using their experience. That's why you bring in Aaron Rodgers. That's the biggest reason. And at least last year, there are a couple points in multiple games that we saw him just flat out just look like he was missing plays. And whether you want to blame that on the offensive line, coaching, whatnot, they did fire their coach midseason. It was just a rough year for Aaron Rodgers, especially coming off of that Achilles tear 2 years ago. It's just a tough spot to be in, and I don't think it's the right move. The one good thing though for the Pittsburgh Steelers that's going to be working for them is that they have a young guy in Will Howard working behind Aaron Rodgers. And is that going to be a storyline that we see moving forward throughout the regular season? If the Steelers start struggling, do they by chance bring in a Will Howard to start in over Aaron Rodgers?
This is an interesting point there that you brought up, the Achilles injury, because I think a lot of the kind of conversation around Aaron Rodgers has gotten more with his off the field kind of issues, right? This is a Steelers organization that's had to deal with its fair share of big personalities over the year, over the tenure of head coach Mike Tomlin down there. They've been able to survive that just fine, but people are calling Rodgers things like a culture killer. And for a guy that's kind of half on the hot seat in Pittsburgh, in Mike Tomlin, bringing in a guy like this is a big risk. On the field, I still think he's got a little bit left, but it seems to be a lot of the off the field stuff, getting the coach fired, like you brought up, bringing in his pals, Alan Lazard, who was a huge negative last season for the Jets, as well as Devontae Adams, who they traded a lot of assets for. That one did not end up working out for them, as he's now crossed the country playing for the Los Angeles Rams. There are a lot of things that could go wrong here. I tend to side more with this idea that Aaron Rodgers has a little bit of life left in his arm. We saw a lot of upside down the stretch for Aaron Rodgers. We saw a little bit more of what that classic Aaron Rodgers might look like, right? We see him finding his receivers, getting rid of the ball quickly. He was the 5th fastest quarterback in the NFL for getting rid of the ball as far as how much time you're holding onto it in the pocket. He was still incredibly accurate. He didn't really lose too much of a step, at least down the stretch in the season, it looked like, when that Jets offense really did start to pick up. I think that with Aaron Rodgers, this team, you brought up the defense already, this team that consistently goes 9-8, he's the best quarterback they've had since Big Ben. Even at his state at 41 years old, people are going to talk about they want this year to be a tank job for the Steelers. They want this year to be in the trash, which is why I think a lot of Steelers fans were kind of not against Mason Rudolph being the starter, just so they could have a hard reset on the franchise. But with Aaron Rodgers here, that means they're going to try and win games. And that pairing of him and DK Metcalf should produce what is probably going to be 9-8 yet again, but the real question comes in playoffs, because they've really struggled in playoffs. If they are, let's just say, projecting outward, they finish 10-7 this season, get the 7 seed in the AFC. Does this change their trajectory in the playoffs, or is this something that is yet again another lateral move for them?
I think the Steelers team is they're always the very defensive heavy. That's what they're known for. The Steelers are a good defensive team with okay offensive weapons, and I still think even with the addition of Aaron Rodgers, their trajectory in the playoffs will still be the same unless Aaron Rodgers manages pull out some witchcraft, throw for 400 yards and both in his first playoff game to get past round one. And I mean, they're still not getting past round two. The Steelers are just a very mediocre organization. Like, historically, they're great, obviously, but when you haven't made it past the first round since 2016, you have a bad rep. You have this team is mid, and the fans they're sick of it. And I think I'd be sick of it too. Honestly, I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be a playoff team every year just to lose in the first round. And the Steelers, like I said, just haven't got past the first round. And even with Aaron Rodgers, even if he manages to throw for 400 yards in that week 1 game or that first round playoff game, they still wouldn't get past round 2. The AFC is a very good team, a very good division. The better of the AFC and NFC, you have the guys like the Bills, you have the Ravens, you have the Chiefs. I mean, those teams are all so good on the defensive side of the ball. And with the Steelers, let's say they play they're the 7th seed and they end up playing, I don't know, let's say they play the Bills in round 1. They would get absolutely manhandled. They would. The Bills are so much better than them in both sides of the ball. And then let's say they manage to beat the Bills somehow, and then they go on to round 2 and play, I don't know, the Chargers. I think the Chargers would go on to beat them anyway too. I mean, the AFC is just too tough. So even if they managed to get past round one, they still wouldn't get past round two and still be in the same spot that they have been for the past 10 years or 9, 10 years now, just stuck in the play, like stuck in the early rounds.
Yeah, for sure. No, we've kind of moved past this point where they've gotten him, but if you were the Steelers GM here, would you have signed Aaron Rodgers, or would you have, with this cycle of mediocrity, as you put it, would you have just decided to run this season with the combo of Mason Rudolph and Will Howard and really hit that hard reset button? Is this the right decision for the Steelers organization to try at the same thing with yet another veteran quarterback, Mehrob?
I think it's a tough place to be in if you're the Steelers right now. You don't really have this. Obviously, this QB draft was not the deepest, one of the best that we've seen, but you do bring in a guy like Will Howard. We saw what Aaron Rodgers did with Jordan Love, so I think that might have played a role in it when what Aaron Rodgers did with Jordan Love back in Green Bay a couple years ago, mentoring him into how Jordan Love is now. But overall, it just feels like this is one of those moves that if Aaron Rodgers starts to tank it all, starts to play mediocre, I almost said basketball, football. If he starts to play any type of mediocre style play and the Steelers start losing, I would not be shocked if Mike Tomlin pulls the plug on him early and brings in a guy like Will Howard to get some experience, some in-game experience, because you can get as much time as you want off the field. You can get mentored as much as you want off the field. But it's those moments when you're asked as a young player to come in, step up to those big moments that make you the guy that you end up being in your career. We've seen Tom Brady be that. I'm not comparing Will Howard to Tom Brady now. Do not call me crazy. But Will Howard could be one of those next big guys. And he's in a situation where if Aaron Rodgers starts falling off, he could be in a golden situation.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying here, but this committal, this bringing in Aaron Rodgers, they had all of the time in the world to decide whether or not to bring him in. This feels to me more like you're our quarterback for a season and we'll see what happens after that. I don't really see a world where they end up benching Aaron Rodgers unless he truly does come out and play like a hot pile of garbage. He is going to be the starting quarterback for this season. He's going to have an incredibly long leash. I don't really see Will Howard getting into it at all. He was a 6th-round quarterback pick, a guy that you kind of just took a flyer on. I know he's coming off of a national championship win, but he was already kind of an iffy quarterback prospect to me. I think putting all your hopes on a guy like that isn't really the best thing, and I just don't really see him getting on the field right now.
I mean, you're not wrong. Will Howard, he like you said, is a great quarterback in college. I mean, that's why you get drafted. You're a great quarterback in college. And, a lot of those great college quarterbacks kind of don't pan out. And I can honestly kind of see Will Howard not panning out. He's a good quarterback, but you have Ohio State. You have obviously the best receiver in the country. You have, you're going from one of the best receiving cores in the country in college football to going to honestly one of the worst college, one of the worst receiver rooms in the NFL. You don't really have a lot going on in Pittsburgh with your receiver room. You have DK Metcalf, but like really, who else? You really don't have many other weapons over there. You do have Pat Fryermuth with your tight end position, which is gonna be a big help for him. But I still think he could pan out. I'm not sure exactly how well he'll pan out, but I mean he's got a decent room he can back up, especially if he gets if he can learn from Aaron Rodgers' teachings, he could be a great quarterback. But I don't really know if I'd wanted to be a mentor to Aaron Rodgers. Especially in the like football wise, yeah, but like off the field, probably not. But who knows? He could be a great quarterback, but I just kind of don't see him panning out in Pittsburgh. That's just me though.
Yeah, at least not right away. But Aaron Rodgers brings in that kind of chance for the Steelers to, I guess, push back this reset another year while they still have that defensive core around. They still need to figure out what to do with TJ Watt. They still need to figure out how much longer you have a guy like Hayward playing down there in the defensive tackle position, right? It's not a easy transition to decide to start losing. And Mike Tomlin's never going to make that decision. The Steelers, as a very proud organization, are never going to make that decision. But sometimes it just feels like it's time to hang up this veil of competitiveness when clearly you're nowhere close to a Super Bowl, just flailing around until you can maybe find a way into the playoffs. And maybe it's time for them to make a move like firing Mike Tomlin if this doesn't work out. There is the chance that Aaron Rodgers comes in and returns to form, but it really doesn't feel that way. This is a move that was a necessity for the Steelers, the way that they were trying to compete this offseason, but it's about time. I think I'm never an advocate for tanking, but it's about time that they at least think about the future a little bit more, so they can avoid turning into what the Saints are right now.
1000%. I cannot agree more with that. And it just feels like a lateral move. I think you put it best when you said that. It just feels like one of those 1-year moves. And then either you go back to the draft, go back to the drawing board for drafting quarterback, or you bring in a guy like Will Howard in the following year after a year on the bench and see what happens. We'll see what Will Howard is. And there's a lot of bright spots, but yeah, it just feels like one of those moves that's just lateral move.
Yeah. But Aaron Rodgers, newest member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. What do you think? Good move, bad move for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Would you have done this if you were the Pittsburgh Steelers GM? And where does this put the Steelers next season? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the NBA Finals tip off in just about 15 minutes, 5 minutes actually. We're going to talk all about that. Who's going to win game 1 and who has the most to gain from winning these finals on either side of the aisle? That's coming up next here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.